years. There's 1,000 years without knowledge. But I just showed you that there was actually extraordinary developments that were taking place, including calculus 600 years before Newton. Ibn al-Haytham stated Newton's first law of motion 600 years before Newton. He actually described Kepler's first law of planetary motion 500 years before Kepler. I was working on my graduate degree. I started to get into Heidegger, who is very controversial, but that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. He was a Nazi for 11 months. Bad Heidegger. Bad. Bad. He denounced the Nazi party after 11 months and said, "You're all a bunch of charlatans, I reject you." And then he spent the rest of World War II as an outcast. But still, that 11 months were gross. He got his professor fired and then took his job. His professor was a guy named Husserl. He was Jewish. I'm doing this because I just don't want anybody to be confused about why I'm reading Heidegger. I'm reading Heidegger, and I realized something in his bibliography. He's quoting Ibn al-Haytham and Ibn Sina. And at the time, I didn't know who they were, so I went, who are these guys? When he was quoting Ibn Sina, the reason he was quoting Ibn Sina is because his teacher, Husserl, who, by the way, was brilliant, he shouldn't have fired him. This is ugly. Husserl had taken Hegel and Ibn Sina and merged them and created a new branch of philosophy called phenomenology. So when Heidegger was taking his thing on being in time to the next level, he was building off of that. And then, of course, that became the moment when philosophy in the world completely changed. Everybody who hates Heidegger is still a Heideggerian. There's no going back. Heidegger changed philosophy. He grabbed it, he shook it, he flipped it upside down, and he redid it. But part of his inspiration for this was that conversation I had with you earlier about Ibn Sina and the nature of the universe. He took and built on that and then changed philosophy forever. So even though the guy was a 1,000-year-old thinker, he was still playing a major role 100 years ago in changing the way we do philosophy. In other words, there's no separation between any of this. It's all connected together. One last thing. So the Arabs had idiomatically translated Aristotle into Arabic. When the Spanish were conquering Spain from the Muslims, they kept encountering libraries. The popes kept issuing edicts to burn all the books, just like when they had burnt the Great Library and just when they shut down the Academy of Athens. They wanted to continue this. The thinking went, you only need one book, it's the Bible, why are we doing this science stuff? We don't need this. What we need to do is purge the libraries of all these books that make me feel uncomfortable. Oh no, that's now. Oh wait, no, that was then too. It's so confusing how nothing changes. We don't learn. Well, the monks who were ordered to destroy the books were the Benedictines and the Dominican monks. The Benedictines and the Dominican monks didn't obey the order. What they did was they dug giant underground libraries beneath their monasteries. When they would show up to the place with the Muslim library that they had to burn, they would have a guy read. They had a guy who would stand here and they had the book. They would turn the book so it was facing him so he could read it. He was a human card catalog. He knew the lists, the names of all the books they had in their secret underground library. So as you would walk by, he'd read it. If he recognized the book, he'd give you one signal and you'd dump it in a pile in the middle of the town. If he didn't recognize it, he'd give you another signal and you'd walk over to a cart where they had a hidden panel and you'd slide the book into that. And then you'd walk back and you'd go grab another book. And then you'd carry it so that that guy could read it. And then, oh, that one goes in this pile. And then afterwards, they'd set that pile on fire so they could show everybody they were burning the books. And then they'd sneak the other books into their underground library where they were busy translating it from Arabic into ancient Greek and Latin. And that's how we have Plato and Aristotle. We would have lost it all because the Christians were going around burning everything. What happened that was, not only did the Benedictine and the Dominican monks have second thoughts about this and refuse to follow their orders. It's good to not follow orders sometimes. But the Italians went, you know what I miss? The good old days when we had science and math and philosophy. Why don't we do that again? And sometime around 1300, they do the Renaissance. 1300, the Crusades end in 1291. After the Crusaders start coming back, they go, you know what we saw when we were there murdering all those Muslims and Jews? They had indoor plumbing and medicine and crop rotation. They're talking about things have gravity and that light has a finite speed and that the universe originates from a point of information. And the Italians go, oh wow, that's so cool. Let's do that here. Isn't that crazy? All right, let's do Q&A for a few minutes and then we have to go. Absolutely. Okay, so the question is, does the Arabs being in Sicily for 2 centuries have an impact on the creation of the Renaissance? The answer is yeah. There was a guy named Frederick II. He happens to be one of my favorite ever rulers. So the Vikings conquered northern France at one point. They renamed northern France after themselves. They were the Northmen, Norsemen. They renamed it after themselves. They were called the Normans. They call it Normandy. The Normans at some point get really bored. They're like, dude, I'm sick of watching peasants grow things. When was the last? So they're saying it in French, but with a Viking accent, right? Because they stopped speaking German and they started speaking French. So just imagine, you know, like the lilting, I can't do it. Right? Something like that. That means happy birthday. So get that going in your head, but do it in French. Je m'appelle Sven, ja. It must have been horrific for French speakers to hear this. And one day they're just like, you know what, dude, let's go kill somebody. Now, the original killing event, they went to Spain, actually, and they captured Barabbas, which today is Saragossa. It was a Muslim city. They capture it, and they're like, wow, this is awesome. So I need you to have in your head redhead and blonde-head Vikings with long hair and braids and big beards, right? And they're just, you know, they got an axe, they're ready to hack people to death. They get there and they see the Arabs doing philosophy and math and science, and they go, this is so cool. They take off their Viking clothing, they start wearing jalabiyas, and they walk around learning Arabic, and they blend into Arab society in Saragossa, in Spain. Well, word gets back to Normandy, and the Normans are like, man, we could do this on a larger scale. So a group of them get in a ship. They sail all the way around around Spain to Sicily. They get to Sicily, they conquer it, and then they have this really interesting situation because there's all these Arabic-speaking people living there. There are people who are speaking Italian living there, and they're Christian because they had converted, right? It didn't tone them down yet. They get toned down later, right? They're still little sociopaths. And then little by little they start to marry into German royalty. This is complicated, and eventually there's a guy named Frederick II. If you look at coins from the time period in Sicily, one side is in Arabic, the other side is in Latin.